Guys, it's Dr. Sage, and I am so excited to be back and posting videos on YouTube. I took a little break. I was out of the country, and frankly, I've been a bit overwhelmed and working on furiously creating some courses I truly cannot wait to share with you. I've been growing my TikTok account, and I hope you'll follow me there. I post pretty much every day and sometimes more than once a day on everything related to attachment and complex trauma and relationships, and I will keep doing that, and I will keep posting these free videos on YouTube, hopefully a little shorter ones and more consistent, and hopefully slowing down. I know that's something I have to keep working on. So thank you so much for joining me. Really quickly, the courses I'm hoping will be posted on Thinkific by the end of September. There will be a free course that will always be free that will be about helping us all teach ourselves and understand emotional types and patterns that are not healthy for our lives. Because I don't care how old you are, if you can download the free course, I would love for you to do it and talk about it. And I know I say it a lot, but I truly believe that as a young person and even a young adult and even a middle-aged adult, if I wasn't in this field, if I had had access to this type of information, I truly believe it would have changed the course of my life and my understanding about patterns and what's healthy and what's not, and boundaries and self-love and all of that stuff, and mental health and frankly physical health, because there is such a strong correlation between what happens to us in childhood and our later adult lives in terms of our chronic health issues and even our current health issues. So I hope you will check those out. I'm going to try to, like I said, keep posting more often. And so today's video is going to be about, how do we create a narcissist? Where does that come from? Where does that dynamic emerge from? And then I'm going to go into a whole series on emotional abuse and neglect and patterns and immaturity and all of that. And so I hope you will join me with those videos as well. Now, really quickly, also, and please don't forget to subscribe and click the bell if you want to get notified when I post new videos, which will hopefully be happening on time now. So today is about narcissism and sort of like how does someone become a narcissist? What happens? Because I have a lot of parents who say, well, I had this dynamic, but I don't want to be that kind of parent. The truth is there's not some just prescriptive formula you can follow. Like if you do these steps, you will have a perfect child. First of all, there is no such thing. Second of all, we are learning more and more, and this I wish it was talked about more, about genetics and environment, and in terms of biology and the environment, what's happening with personality disorders. And so we are finding out more and more that even borderline has a stronger and stronger connection to biology and genetics. In other words, it's not always just about trauma. In fact, I know many borderlines or parents of my patients who are borderlines who don't have any significant trauma. Now, did they have relational trauma that we can't necessarily see that seemed not that bad, but was? Of course. But there's research growing and growing. And so I will share an article down below about narcissism and borderline PD and a relationship between some biological markers there. And I will discuss that at the end of this video. So stick around for that. So when we talk about where does a child come from with this type of disorder, I know it's easy to hate on narcissists. It really is. And frankly, they can be horrific. I'm not going to deny that. But, I don't feel great about not also acknowledging that these things come from somewhere, especially in some cases where there may be a biological component and we're all just saying, well, you're terrible. Now, yeah, we need to be able to deal with narcissists and protect ourselves, and understanding their childhood, even if it was a complete show, doesn't mean we should say, oh, well, that's okay. Their childhood was bad, so I'll just accept the behavior. No. And when we have parents like this, we often choose partners like this, so we can be in this generational trauma cycle we want to break. So I want to always hold compassion for where this comes from, and then another compassion, and then really empowering behavior in ourselves in terms of if we do have a label, we understand it. Now, I use the word wounded a lot because the truth is, I can't say that every behavior of a parent is a narcissist or borderline or immature. I think they all can swirl together. So unless we're talking about specific patterns, I often use the word wounded just to give acknowledgement that something isn't working for that person, that that person who is wounded might also be wounding to you. People who are wounded often can be wounding. And also just because I don't always know, we can't just be cut and dry. All of these disorders and experiences and traumas in our lives exist on a spectrum. And so I want to have some grace for that where I can. But I don't want to minimize, the impact or labels when they are appropriate. So when we think about attachment styles, right, we see a lot of discussions around avoidant attachment styles and narcissism, and I think that one does correlate more. I think when we talk about things like being over-involved in the parent's state of mind, which is very common in anxious attachment, we're talking about making the child your emotional best friend. And I do think narcissists do that. They like to see their kids as a reflection of them. And so they often will try to enlist them as little adults. They will engage with them as little adults, and inappropriately so in many different ways from the time they're little, or they will overshare, right, information, especially if they're trying to turn one parent against another. They will have no problem, creating stories or lies or digging up things that weren't theirs to share. So, it gets complicated, but that's where I think we can see that blend of the anxious part. But in terms of the patterns, we can see emotional abuse and neglect. We can see physical abuse and neglect. We can see parents often who did not know how to emotionally attune, right? They lacked empathy themselves. The child often becomes a little island unto themselves, becomes very autonomous. And we also know the research shows that many of these parents often overindulged in terms of telling their child how great they were with no reality at all, right? A complete fantasy. Like maybe the child was okay at soccer, and the parent just told them from the time they were born that they were a genius and they were gonna, play on sports teams. What a setup that is, right? When you're not actually even, that's not your forte, right? But you've been told it is. So we can see that, and we can also see, like I was saying, an under-involvement where there's no real emotional connection and mirroring of the child, and the child becomes very kind of narcissistically focused themselves. They become very much into themselves and to taking care of themselves and shutting down their needs, and often therefore not being able to validate or empathize with the needs of others. The truth is we are relational human beings. And if we think about things like polyvagal theory that's taught us that we are relational and we need to co-regulate. We need each other to feel safe, to feel connected, to be in a relationship. If you never get that, you still have to find a way to survive. And so oftentimes I think that wound gets suppressed and stuffed. It's never modeled and taught to you. Oh, this is what reciprocity looks like, right? We teach our kids, okay, you hurt someone, this is how you say you're sorry. Side note, I think we do a terrible job of teaching kids how to make true relational repair beyond the words, I'm sorry. That's a different video. But this is what we're talking about, this environment that at the core, it's sort of like a narcissistic environment, right? It's about the parent more than the parent and child dyad, more than about that relationship. And so over time, maybe through genetics and the experience, the environment, the child is being molded and sort of like trying to survive by staying on their own sort of page about themselves and not getting their own needs met, and how hurtful that is. Think about it. If you had a parent who just wasn't there, right? They might be the parent who drove all the pickups and went to every soccer match and all your cheer competitions or all your piano recitals, but they were glazed over, right? They weren't ever really there. They were saying the words, or they were actively, being competitive with you, or jealous of you, or minimizing you, or mocking you. All of that kind of stuff is going to be contributing to what we often see in these homes where narcissism really takes root. So at the core, we have this inconsistency. We have this inability to be present as a parent and hold the space as a parent to make room for the child to be a child. The child is often sort of emotionally in the wilderness. They are often, as I said, they might be mocked, they might be encouraged to be extremely competitive. And because of what we know about the roles that narcissists often put on their children in terms of a narcissist, let's say creating another narcissist, is that it's all about what you do that best reflects that parent. In other words, when the child is doing well, they are a shining reflection of me. But when they're not, they're a failure, right? They are, these are the kind of parents who will pit kids against each other. This is the golden child. This is the good child. And they will literally give this child more money for grades or a new car and give this child, the outcast child, right? We talk about all those different roles. They will give that child a car that's like 1/10 the price of the other car. And so we often call that the scapegoat, right? That's the child who's the bad child. We have the withdrawn child. We often have the peacemaker, right? The child who's trying to navigate the parents and the other siblings. We have all these different ways that the narcissist engages with kids, and especially in divorces, but not necessarily. Narcissistic parents who are trying to, raise kids are often creating flying monkeys. And what are those? Those are little advocates for the narcissist who will literally go after the other siblings. This parent will, it's really the core. It's ironic because a lot of narcissistic parents accuse the other parent of parental alienation when they are the ones who are often doing that. But they will try to split and divide. And what you will often see in these families, it's weird. It's like you can have a bunch of kids and everyone is like every man for himself because there's so much splitting going on, just like in borderline, good and bad, my favorite, not my favorite, that there's this limited amount of resources in terms of the parent. So whatever there was to get isn't very much. And so there's a competitiveness to it that can make it very toxic for siblings as well. And very confusing because the golden child is getting a very different experience than the child who's the scapegoat. So I do think that a lot of parents who create narcissists, it's that generational trauma dynamic, are just reenacting what they knew, their limited capacity for emotions, their need to be competitive or make their child their emotional partner. And so that is really the breeding ground. The last two things we can often see are a child being born just, sort of naturally more sensitive. And when you have a more sensitive, self, the world, I would say the membrane around you is very thin. It's very thin between you and the world. And so oftentimes we have sensory triggers more sensitive, the noises or being judged. We take it so much more. And so that can affect, we know, that a child's response to the environment, creating more of a narcissistic behavior in themselves. And as I said before at the beginning of the video, I'll link below, some research shows in NPD and BPD higher levels of hypersensitivity, as I'm saying, and of higher levels of oxidative stress. And so we're it's sort of like, okay, well, what is that? Is that like the trauma creates the stress in the body and vice versa? It's like the chicken or the egg dynamic. And I think we're still learning about how trauma affects the body and vice versa. But I think they're obviously, how could they not be, right? No rocket science here. They're all connected. It's all connected. So what can you do really quickly if you are a parent and you want to be aware of trying not to create this behavior or encourage it in your own kids? I would say trying to be emotionally available and present, trying to be empathic, right? Not focusing only on performance and grades and SAT scores and sports, trying to say that you matter, not just what you do, because for narcissists, it's about what it looks like, not about what it feels like. And so you want to come back to that center where you are attuning. You want to be mindful of your child or children who are more sensitive and know that maybe what works for this one doesn't work as well for that one. It's too harsh for that child. Not that you shouldn't have accountability and consequences and structure of some sort. I think it's important to be mindful of sort of like I'm saying, who your kids are. And at the core, it's important to be mindful of your own wounds and trauma, because the truth is, if you had a narcissistic parent, or frankly a borderline parent, or a parent who just on some level really struggled, there are going to be some blind spots for you. And oftentimes when you're the most triggered and you're not aware of it, and we're parenting from our triggers, we're often doing and saying things that in retrospect we would like so much not to do. So I do believe that the greatest gift you can give your kids is to work on yourself, and then be mindful of all those dynamics in terms of how you set up structure, emotional availability, and attunement, and expectations in your family dynamic. So that's what the research says. That's the core of it. As I said, don't forget that, you know, even in the most horrific cases where narcissists have come out of a difficult childhood, I think it's important to have compassion, but that doesn't mean that you accept their behavior. You know, you can understand it from an intellectual perspective, but still hold the boundary, even around your heart space, right? Because if you let yourself go down that pathway, you might get sucked back into really damaging, toxic, and abusive narcissistic behavior. But just try to remember that, okay, it comes from somewhere, so how does that help me? It helps me by understanding the patterns so I can work on healing my own life, my own relationships, and my own story. Thanks again for watching. It's good to see you guys again. Please feel free to share and post. I promise I have been reading your comments this whole time, but just being overwhelmed. I'm going to do a better job of responding more quickly to my new videos. I really do want to hear what you guys have to say. I so appreciate when you share and you have feedback, whatever it is, and I look forward to doing more. And frankly, the courses I've built are really about how to heal from these kinds of parents I talk about, how to work on your attachment styles, how to deal with your parenting triggers when you were raised by parents like this. And it's really all come from feedback I've received from you guys on these videos and on TikTok. So thank you so much. Please stay safe and well in these crazy times. Please have a lovely day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.